Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Are you craving for that special meal that will entice your taste buds and leave you with lasting, thrilling memories? Look no further. Spice Island Bulenga has got your answer. Natural, fresh and delicious juice, the best meals. Don't miss our daily specials from Monday to Sunday. Pizza Wednesday, Saturday Pizza Bonanza, you buy one and take two. Come dine with us and feel the experience. We are located at Prime Shopping Center in Bulenga, Mitiana Road. For inquiries, call us on 0704111720. Spice Island, we treat your cravings.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Our viewers, we can't thank you enough for keeping it Alternative Digitalk, where we stream live on our social media pages. That's the Alternative Uganda Facebook page and also our Digitalk TV, and let alone the very show streams onto our YouTube channel, which also goes by the name of the Alternative Uganda. As it has been every Wednesday around this time, Ugandan time is 7:14 p.m. and Washington time it's 11:14 a.m. I'm with my colleague to take you through. We have our show, which we introduced some time ago, the Afro-Caribbean link, where we literally connect with the Caribbean countries, some leaders therein, to share, share lots of information that they have, and also to ensure that we connect so that we don't lose our connection between the Africans and the blacks or the people in the Caribbean countries. Today, as we were the other time, we are glad to host a very special guest whom we hosted. In fact, he's the one who opened our show previously. But to say, my name is Norman Tumhimbise. I am with my colleague, whom he should introduce himself rather to the public, and then we shall literally invite our guest to, and then we can dive into the entire discussion. Please share with the rest.
Thank you so much, Mr. Norman. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here yet again. My name is Roger Sturiabwe, and I have a great privilege to be here today in a discussion with a gentleman we have had before, Mr. Rickford Burke, and we're going to be looking extensively into the issues around Guyana as a country and the allies, obviously, in the region. The situation that is between the black and the Indian, Indians, I think, Guyanese who are Indians by descent. I think that is a better way to put it.
Indian origins.
Yeah, that one. That one. So today it's going to be, as usual, we're going to be talking. It's sort of a conversation. It's not an interview, a question and answer. It's a discussion. More like, so you can contribute to the discussion. You can go to our social media platforms, the Alternative Uganda and Digitalk TV on Facebook. I'll put in your question or comment. We'll be able to read it as we follow up. My name is Roger Sturiabwe again. It is a pleasure to be here. I think Norman will invite the guest officially.
Thank you, Rogers. Mr. Burke, may I hear from you so that you can communicate to our viewers? Like I said, in Uganda it's 7 p.m. I understand in Washington, D.C. it's 11. So we are in Uganda. That's where we are broadcasting from, East Africa and Africa in particular. We do not, save for your height, our color, we are the same people. So may you please say hello to our viewers and the people who are following you. Back to you, Mr. Rickford.
Well, good morning. It's now 11:17 here in New York, and it's a pleasure to talk with you guys, especially as we celebrate Black History Month in America. Good morning to your listeners. Well, good morning to your listeners, those of us who are in North America and Guyana. Well, in Guyana, it's good afternoon, and the Caribbean, and good evening to you guys in Africa. Thanks for hosting me.
Once again, I will definitely ask you to literally give us a brief background for which you had that press statement, which Caribbean Guyanese Institute for Democracy issued on 14th, if I'm not mistaken, 14th Feb. May you please give us a background? Why did you come up with such a statement in the first place?
If I heard your question correctly, you're asking for the mission of CGID? Norman, I didn't hear the question.
I understand you had a press statement that was issued on 14th Feb, and I want you to share with the viewers the purpose for which you had such a press conference and issued such a statement, because literally most of our discussion is going to depend so much onto your harsh, in quotes, demands that you made in this statement. May you please share with us why did you come up with such?
Oh, I got you now. What motivated the statement is the Vice President of Guyana, Jagde, who's a former president, who's a racist, and as far as I'm concerned, despises the Afro-Guyanese community and is working to disempower that community. He, I guess, responding to which are now widespread allegations of racial discrimination and apartheid governance, where the government is trying to bring the African Guyanese population in Guyana under subjugation and shut them off from the economic development of the country, shut them off from benefiting from the oil wealth of the country. He claims he's trying to do ecology, and he claims that the opposition and surrogates of the opposition are trying to basically stymie development and discourage the Afro-Guyanese population from taking advantage of the opportunities the government is offering them for development. And you know, he alleged that the government was creating opportunities for Afro-Guyanese, which is complete nonsense. This government is currently at war with the Afro-Guyanese community. The People's Progressive Party government of Guyana has forever, it's been in power, I think 25 of the last probably 30 years. And they have, every time they come to power, they launch a war on the Afro-Guyanese community. The last time they were in power, they formed death squads that killed over 1,000 young Afro-Guyanese men who they saw as cultivating a resistance to their racist government. They just labeled them criminals and killed them, and the international community has not responded. Currently, the government is dispossessing Afro-Guyanese of lands. They're taking away Afro-Guyanese lands. You guys saw the videos of what they did to the people of Moka, an ancestral Afro-Guyanese ancestral village bought by slaves. They are using oil resources. Guyana is now one of the largest oil producing countries in the world. They're using the oil revenues to develop their own communities. There's not been not one development project in an Afro-Guyanese community. And Guyana is virtually segregated. We don't necessarily live together. You have Indian villages and Indian tongues and Indian regions and Afro-Guyanese villages and Afro-Guyanese tongues. And of course, the fastest growing population in the country is now the mixed race. But by and large, this government is governing only for their own ethnic collective. And they are being advised by Donald Trump's Republican advisors. So they're very divisive. They're implementing Jim Crow policies that are reminiscent of the racist segregationists in America during the Civil Rights era. And so we have launched on an international campaign where we want the world to understand we have a racist government in Guyana, and they're stoking racial hostility, and they're in a civil war in the country. And I have been saying, my organization has been saying that we believe within the next 5 years, if this government remains in power, we will be struggling to remain a united country, and we're heading down the road of Sudan. What is how is this government is stoking kind of a Rwanda civil war, where the military, the police, largely Afro-Guyanese, commanded by Indians and some token black people who are basically house slaves that support them, and they use the military to bring the black population and the opposition support base in line. There's speech rights in the country. If you criticize the government on social media, they arrest you, and they're using cybercrime laws to stifle dissent. And so we have a problem in Guyana. We have a problem of race. We have a problem of ethnicity. We have a problem where the government does not believe Afro-Guyanese are full citizens and with entitled rights. We have a problem where this government believes that Guyana is a plantation that they own slaves. And we are determined in my organization to expose this, to stop them, to stop racism, to stop racial discrimination, and to fight for the equal rights and justice of the people of the African diaspora and other Guyanese that don't support this government.
Mr. Rickford, you see what sounds kind of tricky is when you mention the word apartheid. It is so big, as in if you compare, if you, like myself and so many others that are living in Africa, the word apartheid, even when we were trying to study about it years ago, it sounded so big, as in there were streets for whites and rather colored, like they used to call it, and also blacks. There were schools for blacks. There were markets for blacks and also markets for the colored. When you use the word apartheid, that Guyana is more or less now becoming an apartheid state, isn't that so big for you to mention? As in, because literally, one might think that there are schools which are specifically for blacks, vis-a-vis those for Indians and other tribes. Rather, isn't that a big statement to choose the leadership in Guyana as of today? Also, in comparison with what was in South Africa, here in Africa?
Well, only difference between what is going on in Guyana and what happened in South Africa is that we had apartheid. We had an apartheid system that was backed up by law. The segregation and the racist policies were actually codified in law. That's not happening in Guyana. But what is happening is that we have de jure policies where it's unofficial. For instance, let's look at what you said just now. You had a cabal, a racist cabal, running the public service, running a country that was majority black. In Guyana, you have the majority of public servants who are black, but they're under subjugation by a Indian cabal that is racist, that doesn't believe that they have equal rights, that doesn't believe that they have an equal foot at the table. At the same time, you have the military and the police. They're majority black, but the government is using a few people, bring them under subjugation and use them to enforce their racist East Indian supremacy and dominance in the country. Let's look at schools. There are no laws in Guyana that say blacks cannot go to the same school as Indians. But when you look at the conditions under which blacks are going to school, it's the same thing. When you look at the health system, when you look at the infrastructure in black communities, it's the same thing. Black people live under subjugation. So my definition of apartheid is we have segregationism, which is present in Guyana. We have racial discrimination. We have political discrimination. We have economic discrimination. What is happening in Guyana is an economic genocide is taking place, where the government is impoverishing deliberately Afro-Guyanese communities. Like, for instance, Georgetown is in Region 4. It's like a state. We call them regions. Region 4 has the largest population, over 300,000. The system of government is you have the central government, then you have the regional democratic councils, and then you have the local NDCs, which are the local, like, village councils. The government is responsible for allocating resources for capital work, so to speak, in those areas. People pay taxes, but what the government is doing in their areas, which are smaller regions, those regions have a big capital budget than Region 4, which encompasses the capital city, which has more than almost 50,000 people, as opposed to one of their regions, 50 or 60 to 80,000 people. All of those regions have a larger budget allocation from the national budget. That why Region 4 has the majority of black people in the country. That's number one. Now, and the government is those regions for funds. Now, those regions are governed or supposed to be governed by a legislative body called a council. Same thing with the city. The city is governed by a mayor and a council elected. But under our laws, the executive of the council, which is the clerk or the regional executive officer, the person who's supposed to execute, or the office supposed to execute the decisions of the legislative body, is appointed by the central government. I think that's a flaw in our laws. So what this does is they appoint their own political hacks to frustrate the work and the work of the council and the will of the people. So, for instance, the council would prepare a budget, or the state. That budget has to be submitted to the Ministry of Finance, the central government. They take out what they want. As a matter of fact, they don't even recognize the budget. The regional executive officer, who's the executive that executes, or the person who executes the administrative function of that local government body, does his own thing with the complicity of the government and completely disregards the elected body that was elected by the people to govern that region. And so that's what we have. Recently, you had the government stepping in and trying to break down the stalls of black vendors in the city who are authorized by the municipality. They pay a fee and they get a vendor's license from the municipality. The central government, which has no jurisdiction over this matter, started to the stalls of those people, and they're all Afro-Guyanese. And the mayor of Georgetown, the capital of Guyana, who's East Indian but supports the opposition party, went on the scene, stood in the way of the bulldozers and the trucks, and said, no stall would be broken or moved here tonight. Are you guys doing this because these are black people? The government sent the police the next day to arrest him in his office, in the municipal building in Georgetown, where the government has no jurisdiction. So because they have access to billions of dollars of oil money, they think they're all powerful. And so they're just running over the opposition because we have a winner-take-all system. The government has a one-seat majority in parliament, one seat, and they're operating as though they have a two-thirds majority in the parliament. They don't care. They're racist. They're being advised by Trump racists, and they have the support of the U.S. ambassador, who's a Trump appointee, who should not be there. And it's a disgrace that the Biden administration still has that ambassador in Guyana, who has been complicit with some, or silent at least, and silence is complicity, silent on some of the racist practices of this government. So I could go through a whole plethora of racist policies and practices that are mirroring the apartheid regime in South Africa. So we are convinced, and it's not only me saying that, throughout the black community in Guyana, everybody is seeing it. This government is an apartheid government. They talk a different talk, but their policies and practice, their regime, and the United States, we are pressuring the United States government not to allow a racist apartheid, most oppressive anti-black government to thrive in the Western Hemisphere, in the backyard of the United States.
Rick, I have so many other questions, but before I even pose the ones that I had written, I'm close to my colleague to also pose what he has, because definitely they are different from mine, and so that we share. Yeah, Riaz.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rickford. That is some sort of revelation. But I wanted to understand, for us to get a bit of perspective and the people who are following us, We wanted to understand what was the genesis of this, what was the beginning of these hostilities. If I understand from, I think, around 1966, when you got independence, they had, the first was a kind
75,
of...
I think. It's 1975.
75, okay. You had a president who was sort of Chinese, with a Chinese origin. And then from that one, you had some blacks. And then after that, from around the 1990s, you had now the ones with the Indian origin. What was the beginning? How did all these hostilities begin to build so much so that now it is termed apartheid, that people are separating the schools, the homes? Soon there will be roads for the Indian and the others for blacks. What was the beginning?
Parties. The People's Progressive Party, after independence was won, or before independence, we had the People's Progressive Party with both Burnham and Jagan. And at some point in time, the two were together, and then they had a split. Jagan left the People's Progressive Party and formed the PNC. And of course, I wasn't born then, but I'm telling you what I've learned from history. And move off with most of the blacks and almost half of the Indians. So the PNC, which is the major part of the opposition, has always been a multiracial party. I just want to make sure I say that. At some point in time, Jagan remained as premier of the country, and Burnham was the opposition. Burnham then joined with the UF, United Front Party, and they won that election. So every time the PNC goes into a coalition with another party, they win elections. So coalition politics work for that party. But from 1961 to 1964, the People's Progressive Party, which is the party in government now, led a civil war in Guyana in retaliation to Burnham and the British. And they conducted massacres of Afro-Guyanese. Of course, there were killings on both sides, because at some point in time when people realize that they're being killed, they'll retaliate. But the People's Progressive Party also conducted an arson campaign across the country. And that arson campaign never ended until they came to power in 1992. They almost burned Guyana flat. We have a national song that says, "Oh, arise, triumphant glory from the ashes of the past." That's what they're talking about when we had multiple fires all over the country, allegedly perpetrated by the People's Progressive Party. And there's and when they came to power in 1992, after Desmond Hoyt conceded to certain electoral reforms, they allegedly won the election, and there's been allegation that they have never fairly won an election, just as they allege has never fairly won an election. So when they came to power in 1992, because of their racist policies, you had people beginning to form a resistance movement. And because the police force is majority black, the government formed death squads. There was one called the Phantom Death Squad, which was headed by Roger Khan, who's now living in Guyana. And Roger Khan and his death squad allegedly conducted hundreds of murders, extrajudicial killings, political assassinations all across Guyana. There is evidence that this government allowed Roger Khan and his gang to import spy equipment used by military. And they were able to triangulate using your phone number where you are, and they sent people to kill you. And Roger Khan was also the head of a drug gang that imported narcotics into the United States. Eventually, the United States started to pursue him. He left Guyana and escaped to Suriname, where he was allegedly involved in a plot to murder the then justice, who's now the president of Suriname. After a while, he was in Suriname and to Trinidad, allegedly being extradited from the country or expelled from Suriname. He was arrested by FBI and DEA agents in Trinidad and brought to the United States, where he tried and convicted and was sentenced to 15 years in jail. When he sentenced, he was deported to Guyana. The APNU government led by APNUFC government led by former President David Granger was at that time and did nothing to hold Mr. Khan accountable for the atrocities he committed. I think this is a matter that should have been taken up by the World Court. These are serious crimes against humanity in which the Jagdeo administration participated. I don't believe Bar Jagdeo, who's now the vice president of Guyana, should have his liberty. I think he has been involved, if not directly, in a conspiracy to commit serious war crimes against humanity, and I think he should be held accountable. It was so bad where the Bush administration at the time called for the then Minister of National Security to resign because the Minister of National Security was involved in the death squad. Somebody leaked telephone records to show that every time the death squad was about to conduct a hit, and after they conducted that hit, which is a murder, they reported the leader of the squad made these phone calls to the Minister of National Security. United States pressured the government for him to step down from office and be prosecuted. And the United States government said they had information that he was involved in criminal activity. That's what the State Department statement said. The government gave him, whisked him away to India and gave him diplomatic immunity and made him the ambassador there. He was never held to account. No one has never been held to account. And they did the same thing when they were in power from 19 to 2015. They have never been held to account. The world has a blind eye, just like they turn a blind eye to Rwanda. Every time there are these atrocities against Black people around the world turns a blind eye, and I guess it's a effect from the way they treated us from slavery. But this generation of Black people, our generation going and generations, are not going to tolerate it. A lot of people have said 85 organizations and prominent Guyanese have said in a letter to the Congressional Black Caucus and in a letter to the Vice President of the United States 2 months ago that the government is stoking a new civil war, just like we had from 1961 to 1964. And the international community is still not doing anything. And so if there's a civil war that breaks out in Guyana, the international community will be visible, along with the PPP.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Before my colleague comes in, you did mention about the death squad, the killing squad and all that business. We had, I think during a UN meeting in Geneva around May of 2010, we had that committee ask Guyana to make an investigation into those allegations of the death squad. And it happens about 2 months later in July of the same year, when I think also it was the United States, was it the United States? That it also said there should be investigations. How far has that happened? Or has there been any results as far as those investigations are concerned?
There's never been an investigation. I'm still astonished that the international community has allowed these deaths to go uninvestigated and the perpetrators unpunished. There's no question that Bart Jagdeo was involved and his government was involved in death squads in Guyana that killed people, and must be accountability. The United States has, under the Trump administration, allowed him to rehabilitate his image. Black people were killed, and I am still angry about it, and I'm determined that someday we will have an investigation. We will continue to pressure the United States government. There must be an investigation. They have used the argument, and reporters in the press have used the argument that these are people that were criminals. Well, first of all, it's not true. Second, even if somebody, you can't just accuse a man of being a criminal on the street and go and gun him and kill him and call that justice. There, in no civilized society that happens. There's a process where you're charged. There's an investigation. You're charged if you committed a crime. you're prosecuted before a judge and a jury or a judge. And if either that you're guilty after the facts and circumstances are presented in an impartial way or to an impartial arbitrator, then so be it. But just like they accuse Black people of being criminals and kill them, anybody else could do it to them. And I don't think they would want people to do that. So, or else we'll have a country with no order and no law. There must be an investigation of these killings, and the killings have started back. You have people being gunned down in the street. The international community is watching them. They can't form death squads anymore, so they have transformed the Guyana police force into their new death, and they're using the Guyana force. The current commissioner takes instructions directly from the political directorate, and they perform the duties of the death squad, where they shoot down Black people who are protesting against racism. They go into Black people's homes and gun them down and kill them. As a matter of fact, Mr. Jagdeo also, even though now they find that the armed services are their friends, Mr. Jagdeo had said that the people in the military are criminals. He went to Berbice, which is the core of his constituency, and said if the Granger administration is re-elected, members of the military will go into East Indian homes and rape their daughters. He has never paid, never been held account for making statements like that. Afro-Guyanese make critical statements of the government, they send the Guyana police force to arrest you. Every talk show arrested allegedly for cybercrimes to criticize the government. The government, as a matter of fact, when they went into power, went to the Ethnic Relations Commission and asked the commission to try to get those of us who are overseas condemning the government extradited and brought back to Guyana to be killed. I mean, they didn't say killed, but brought back to be prosecuted. But then the outside, they're threatening us with they're supporting to kill us. And I have offered that when they kill us, what will happen? They will live on forever, or they will survive. You know, I think we ought to have a harsh reality in Guyana. The national community needs to hold some sort of summit on Guyana's future.
Mr. Rickford, I hope you hear me and and our team. We kind of seem to have either lost you. I don't know whether you're back and you can hear.
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you.
Okay, great.
You
see, I want to quote you, and I want to use your document which you issued on 14th February. Your statement. You seem to suggest that the present ambassador by the names of Sarah Ann Lynch is part of the problem. And also in the same statement, you seem to suggest that the United States hasn't done enough because you quoted them for having nominated a new ambassador in 2021 who hasn't been appointed to be the ambassador in Guyana. But Rickford, this US you're talking about, they are hosting you and so many people from Guyana, exilees in quotes. Don't you think there is some bit of conflict herein mentioned? The same people that are hosting you and others and other exilees are using the same land to say, guys, you haven't done enough, without taking recognition of their support to accommodate you as you push back the other regime. What do you have to say? It's kind of, it's kind of tricky.
An exilee. I I live in the United States. I'm a productive tax-paying citizen. There is a conflict. The United States has certain values. The United States respects democracy, respects freedom of speech, respects association. These are democratic values for which the United States is a beacon to the rest of the world. I'm pretty sure the ambassador is a perfectly, probably fine woman, but I believe that the ambassador still represents the Trump values. The Trump administration literally installed this regime in power because they paid Republican lobbyists to lobby for them, and to get them in power. The results of the last election state that on the certificate of elections, it states by the chief elections officer that the declared results is not the will of the people. The matter was not litigated in court because the Chief Justice threw out the petition on a technicality that Mr. Granger was not served on time. I believe that the election petition must be determined based on the merits and the facts and evidence submitted to the court. We didn't have the benefit of that in Guyana. The American ambassador represents the American head of state. President Joe Biden has said what his values are, what his foreign policy is. The Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, has adumbrated U.S. foreign policy. Everything that is happening in Guyana is antithetical to U.S. foreign policy and the values. We question whether the State Department is getting accurate reports on the political situation in Guyana. That's number one. Number two, this ambassador has ingratiated herself into the People's Progressive Party and the government in a way that I've never seen. She has been seeing at private events hosted by the president, the christening of his child. She has been in Guyana delegations, Texas audiences saying that democracy was challenged and we won, as if she's part of the government. This ambassador has gone to the home of a PPP supporter, financier, who's under FBI investigation, unprecedented. When she was challenged on it, she said it was a bathroom break. It was not. It was a dinner or lunch or something. She traveled in the same plane with these people. It's unprecedented. And we believe that the Biden administration represents something totally different from the values we saw the Trump administration demonstrated. And we believe that there should be an ambassador that demonstrates or at least carries out the will and represents the values of this democratic administration. This ambassador was very vocal, very critical of the Granger administration at every step, claiming that all she wants is the Constitution to be followed, democratic values that are internationally acceptable to be. Well, this government is not doing it. This government is a racist government that subjugates Afro-Guyanese. They infringe on free, as a matter of fact, they oppress people. They run the government as though it's a plantation they own. And she's silent. And it's not only the American ambassador, the ABC ambassador, American, British, Canadian. And I've always said that they came from, they're from countries that do not people equally either. So I don't know if their silence has a lot to do with the culture in the countries they come from. But they represent Western democracies, so-called Western democracies, and they must speak out against democratic infringements. And to the ambassador does not, it's inevitable and it's unacceptable. And the highest ranking Democrat in Congress has called for her to be removed. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke has called for her to be removed. Understand that that a new ambassador was nominated by the administration, and we're calling for that ambassador to be have a hearing at the Congress in the Senate, a confirmation hearing, and if she's approved to be appointed. We think this ambassador is doing damage to the polity. She's seen as partisan, and she does not have the confidence or support, even though it's not necessary for the execution of her job, of half of the population of Guyana. If you're an ambassador and people see you as partisan and involved in Guyanese politics or the politics of the country in which you serve, then there's a problem. I think you should be recalled.
Okay, Mr. Rickford, I should confess that your show is one of those most trickiest shows that we have here, that every when we are yet to, rather begin the conversation, our time is more or less up. For instance, we have lots of comments which we will definitely not leave here, minus reading them to you, even if it means reserving our questions so that we could reserve them for some our next conversation. But I would want to, I don't know.
I have one question, and it's in relation to especially the letter that you just wrote to the US generally, if I should put it that way. You seem to, every time there's a problem in Guyana, you call upon the US. And I have not heard you say, we call upon other countries or European countries or even
Chinese,
or Chinese or even the ones...
Even Russia itself.
Even the ones in the Caribbean itself. I've not heard you call upon these countries. And for what democracy might be defined, because you seem to prefer the US, why is it that it is only the US that must do something and you're leaving out the whole community, global community out? Why is it like that?
Well, first, I live in the US. Second, the US is the one that put that government in there. And the US leads the global community. And to the extent that the US has global reach and global influence, we believe that if the US government takes a position, the rest of the world is going to fall in line based on that foreign policy decision of the United States. But like I said, we live in the United States. This government complains to the United States government for us. They've written several letters to the Justice Department, the State Department about me and my organization, trying to use, they have been trying to procure the FBI to silence us and infringe on our free speech so that we could shut up. Matter of fact, now the FBI is investigating some crimes committed by the government. We reach out to this government because we live here. We have a very large Guyanese community here. 1.5 million Guyanese live outside of Guyana, and I'm pretty sure most of them live in the United States and in Europe, and then in the Caribbean. So to the extent that we reach out to the United States is because the United States exerts significant influence on governance in Guyana. As a matter of fact, it seems to me like the government of Guyana has to consult with the US before they make any major decisions. Guyana government did not announce that they had agreed to establish a Taiwan office in Guyana. It was announced by the US embassy, and then it will have to be reversed because we wanted to know who's running the country. So you understand why we reach out to the United States. The United States has significant influence on the government of Guyana, and it was the United States government that installed this racist regime in Guyana, and they must all help to solve the problem that this government has created.
I wanted to read one of this. It's this hot comment here, and it's from your viewer by the names of Miranda Brown. Mr. Rickford Burke is a supporter of the opposition who has not been in Guyana for over 20 years. He is now speaking from a position of experience. There is no segregation. The Prime Minister is a proud African Guyanese who is an Army retired Brigadier General. He is highly respected by the masses. The police and the army is predominantly Afro-Guyanese. And this is your viewer by the names of Miranda Brown. So you're hiding in
I
the
suspect
US
that
for over
Miranda
20
Brown
years.
is
You
the
have
minister.
lost touch with what is happening in Guyana. That's what he seems to suggest.
Well, I could tell you that that person posing as Miranda Brown is the Minister of Information in Guyana, who's been following your program, or it comes out of his office. I'm Guyanese. I don't have to live in Guyana to represent the interests of Guyanese. Just like Israelis live in America and they represent to the fullest extent, in a most comprehensive way, the interests of Israelis at home. I don't want anybody from the government to tell me how I must exercise my Guyanese citizenship. That's my right. They can go and tell their supporters that in Queens, who they see that have a right to intervene and to go home and to stay here and talk. They don't determine how I exercise my rights as a citizenship. So Miranda can be dismissed.
In sort of the same manner as Miranda has said, we hosted the leader of opposition, Honorable Aubrey Norton, a while back. And there was this particular comment I thought I should also read to you because it seems to have the same interest. The gentleman was called Philip Michael. And here is his message. He says, the African structure is life and well in Guyana. I can tell you that Norton rode on their back to power, so did Granger, but the story after they get to power is always shock. Granger detained the highest ranking African ambassador for daring to request a meeting. This is aside blocking all African investment in Guyana, including a refinery in Linden. And Norton, after swearing to high heaven, became only the opposition leader, and as I am informed, the leader of the African community has been waiting 2 months to meet with him. He refuses to show up to a meeting with the Nigerian High Commissioner. To cut the story short, a meeting is to be held next week to determine the way forward for the interests of the African Guyanese. So while the Africans are always willing to play their part, the Afro-Guyanese elite system are more interested in serving the white interests only than their people. Now, you are a black Guyanese who lives in the US.
Add an elite.
An elite at that. And then you have people in government. That one, Miranda Brown just mentioned, the Prime Minister was also a black Guyanese. We have a lot of black Guyanese in government that are also working right now. Where is their support in this whole system? Because they seem to not show up in the issues that you'll be talking about.
Well, I'll explain the black Guyanese in government in this way. Remember that there were people who helped the imperialists to sell. You know that? I think we should know that. There are people who cooperated. They're house slaves. There were people, look at Django Unchained, right? He swore that he was a white imperialist, but he was a black man. And so that's how I would describe Mark Phillips. He's a house slave. But I notice he's exceptionally quiet. My understanding is that he's a little disquiet about racism in the country. Maybe he is going to make a statement after my comment here today. The people, blacks in the government have no power. The de facto minister for every ministry in which there's a black person is Tagle is the de facto president. He's the de facto everything. In terms of let me say this. I'm not going to focus on leadership and elites in the black. I'll say this. Since this government came to power, they have been accused based on tendencies of racism and apartheid governance. Not once has anyone in this government reached out to the black community. The government has refused to meet with black community leaders, black elected officials, even the opposition leader. You can't run a government in which you govern only for your ethnic collective. You're going to have a failed state as a result of civil conflict. That's an unchallenged theory. Second, this government is using all of the resources of the country, taxpayers' money. Blacks pay taxes, Amerindians pay taxes, East Indian pay taxes. The government is taking all of that money and use it only for the benefit of the East Indian ethnic collective. The government has recently defunded Padaji, which is the largest black organization in Guyana and is the arm of the decade of recognition of Africans around the world. They defunded that organization. They defunded ACDA, which is the African Cultural Development Organization that celebrates emancipation. In the meantime, they're giving hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to East Indian cultural organizations. Isn't that apartheid? Isn't that discrimination? Isn't that segregation? So maybe I would like to hear this Miranda person, who I believe is the Minister of Information, because I know that the Minister of Information, through a false name, a nom de plume, responded to your last program. I got confirmation of that from someone in his office, and he works out of the Prime Minister's office. He himself is a black house slave, who's a convicted criminal actually in the government. So I'm not sure what that person is talking about. I want to focus on the responsibility of the government. The government has to govern. The opposition is not in government. The opposition have a responsibility to make sure that the needs and welfare of the people are properly catered for. That is the responsibility of government. Yes, the opposition has a responsibility to provide effective representation for the constituents. And I think to some extent they're failing in that regard. And I've criticized them for it. And the opposition needs to get their act together, unite, stand as one, and challenge every single thing one does. That's so far for my comment about the opposition. But I want to focus on the government, because the government is the institution with the power and the obligation to govern for all. And they're failing. They're a racist government. They're modeling themselves after the apartheid government in South Africa, and that's unacceptable. And I think the international community need to respond, and Guyanese need to do everything in their power to get that government out, that political party out of government.
You provoked Miranda Brown because you said you want also to hear from him or her. I don't know. He went ahead to say, I think it's in regards to the allegations, for lack of another word, about the evictions and the rest, and displacement of people. So Miranda Brown goes ahead to say, how could vendors sell on the roadways at the entrance of the main public hospital? Emergency vehicles cannot pass freely. He also goes ahead to say, the city council has a history of diverting resources to political projects and necessary development projects. So I think he's trying to justify the reason for which there are such evictions and, displacing people and the rest. In his view, it's like people come and, camp at the entrance of the hospitals. You now wonder where the ambulances would pass. So he's in support of such evictions, for lack of another word. This is your.
But that's the Minister of Information, and if he wants to debate, if the Minister of Information wants to debate the City Council, he must go to the City Council. He shouldn't come on this forum. This forum is for us to express our views and have a discussion, so I'm just going to dismiss what he's saying. The national government has absolutely no jurisdiction over vendors in Georgetown. And that's the jurisdiction of the City Council. And if the Minister of Information wants to take that up, let him take it up in court or go to the City Council. Let him get lost from here.
In one second, there is a viewer who says that these Ugandan colleagues have been taken and colonized by. So he's terming you as our colonizer. It's just a tricky one that we have been taken. I don't know how many kilometers from Guyana to Uganda where we are, for him to assume that you have colonized us. But that aside, I think you have something to say, and we call it a day, like for some remaining minutes.
Well, he's colonized because he's a house slave, a Django in a racist government.
What I want to invite Miranda Brown, because he seems to have some sort of facts that we may not have clarity about.
Maybe both of them. We could have both of them.
Or both of you. So maybe when we have both of you on a platform, we can get some sort of insight from both sides, so that he does.
Yeah, ask Miranda Brown to declare himself.
Exactly. So thank you so much for being with us. But as you leave, I want you to tell us what now the projection is going to be, because now we have the US that seems sort of irresponsive. It's not responding to the calls that you are making, but the government also of Guyana, the PPP, the part of the government, is not doing any less of what they are doing as far as racism is concerned. What is going to happen now? What are you going to do in the event that the US does not respond?
Oh, the US will respond. We are in touch. Listen, we don't make these statements in isolation. We know what we're doing. We are very strategic. I can assure you the U.S. will respond. As you know, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries has said to the government of Guyana that the United States will not tolerate racism and that they must treat people equally. The government caught a fit when he said that. He said it 3 times already. The Attorney General of New York warned the government. Other members of Congress, Hank Johnson, Yvette Clarke, Albino Cerise, a number of members of Congress have commented about racism in Guyana and the equitable governance and equitable distribution and benefit from the country's resources and natural patrimony. There will be, my understanding is that there will be action by the United States government. I understand that sometime early this year, before mid-year, the United States government is going to act, and you're going to see some sort of significant action by the US with regard to Guyana. Bearing in mind that the people that control the Democratic Party in Congress are from New York. They are all part of the New York delegation. The vice chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus is my congresswoman. So we have access to the right decision makers in the United States.
Okay. Another viewer here by the names of Mark Late, he or she says, oh dear, no. It's I don't know how they pronounce this name, but it's Upn Granger. He says, can these Ugandan brothers please ask real questions? Ask him why he cannot come to Guyana. The same person goes ahead to say, Buck, you and your Brooklyn basement dwellers are only calling the government racist. Come back home and say that.
That comment couldn't be directed to me.
I think we should be leaving here, but also to add, does Mr. Buck, is Mr. Buck saying that Afro-Guyanese are stupid people without a voice? I think this is your colleague, the other Miranda Brown. To say there are lots of comments that we cannot read, and from me, I want to ask you a precise question on a scale of 10 marks. May you please mark your government in Guyana out of 10? How many marks will you give them? And then for
0.
me, it's going to be my last comment, and I'll cross back to my get us out of here. Out of 10, mark your Guyanese government.
0.
Back to you.
That is quite interesting.
So there's lots of room for improvement.
Has absolutely no delivery as far as their mandate is concerned. That is something else. But thank you so much, Mr. Buck, for creating time to come and talk to us. We as Africans, obviously, do understand the sort of situation that can be. And of course, as much as we have not been to Guyana, the world is sort of a global village nowadays, so we can get anything and everything that goes on around the world. So we thank you so much. I'm going to give you a minute to say your closing remarks, and then we can get out of today.
Well, thank you. Like you see from the comments, every time I am speaking, the government sends all its supporters. I guess I'm so important to the country. To attack me, I must be speaking truth to power. That is the government. They don't believe in reconciliation. They don't believe in any sort of dialogue. They don't believe in resolution. They just believe in war and attacks and guns and bullets. And I'm happy that the Minister of Education Information is demonstrating the approach this government has, because it's everything for them is a confrontation, everything for them is a competition, everything for them is about who could be insulted. Coming on international program and talk about black people are basement dwellers. Africa is now being exposed to the level of racism that this government propagates, this government and its supporters. They call us the N-word. And I'm happy that we are hearing from this Miranda person and this other person who think that black people all live in basements in Brooklyn and we're criminals or whatever it is. You guys are getting a first-hand view of the experience of Afro-Guyanese in Guyana. Like I said, that my organization and I will continue to be fierce advocates for democracy and the rights of Afro-Guyanese and those other ethnicities that don't support this government. The international community needs to come together, and we need to have a discussion on apartheid governance in Guyana and Guyana's future. And like I said, we are going to head into a civil war if these matters are not resolved politically.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir, for making the time yet again. I will surely reach out anytime we have issues to address. I had
informed the Guyanese that next week, Wednesday, we definitely should keep it live and see who else we shall host next week, Wednesday.
Yeah, and we most of the times we'll try to get people in government, because now the issue is just more than the normal people. There are issues that need to be discussed. And so we try to get some of the people in government or around to try and get insights and try to find solutions, obviously. This is not just to appear here and look in the camera and speak good English and go home. It's to make sure that at least whatever we are doing yields to something much better. So thank you so much from us as Digitalk here live in Uganda, and the gentleman, Mr. Burke Rickford from the USA, and the people from Guyana and those from around Africa. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll be here at the same time, same place, Wednesday next week. Thank you so much. Have a good day.